Hey there. Welcome back to another deep dive into the chaotic world of Family Guy. Tonight, we're going to explore something that might help you drift off to sleep while learning about one of the most fascinating aspects of the show, the incredible web of superhero references and appearances that have been woven throughout its 20-plus-year run. Now, you might be wondering why Family Guy and superheroes make for perfect bedtime content. Well, there's something oddly soothing about cataloging the familiar faces of comic book icons as they pop up in unexpected places throughout the Griffin family's adventures. The repetitive nature of these appearances, the comfortable familiarity of the characters, and the gentle absurdity of how they're used creates a perfect backdrop for relaxation. Let's start our journey at the very beginning, because that's always a good place to start when you're settling in for the night. The show's very first superhero appearance happened way back in Season 1, Episode 3, titled Chitty Chitty Death Bang. This was Family Guy finding its comedic voice, and even in those early days, the writers knew that superhero references would become a cornerstone of their humor. Peter Griffin, being the eternally unreliable father figure we all know and love, found himself in need of an excuse for why he couldn't secure a reservation at Cheesy Charlie's for Stewie's first birthday party. In typical Peter fashion, he spins an elaborate tale about how the restaurant manager transformed into the Incredible Hulk when confronted. It's a simple gag, but it established something important. Family Guy would use superhero references not just for quick laughs, but as a way to explore Peter's tendency toward exaggeration and fantasy. The Hulk reference works on multiple levels here. On the surface, it's funny because we know Peter is lying, making up an increasingly ridiculous story to cover his own incompetence. But deeper down, it reflects how we all sometimes wish we could transform into something more powerful when faced with everyday frustrations. The Hulk represents that primal desire to just smash through our problems, which is something that resonates whether you're awake or drifting off to sleep. Moving forward to Season 1, Episode 5, A Hero Sits Next Door, we encounter our first major DC Comics cameo. The show presents us with a cutaway gag involving the Justice League engaged in a poker game, complete with adult entertainment elements that the show was already becoming known for. This scene features Wonder Woman, Superman, Batman, Green Lantern, The Flash, Hawkman, Aquaman, and Robin, establishing early on that Family Guy would treat these iconic characters with irreverent humor rather than reverence. What's particularly interesting about this early Justice League appearance is how it sets up patterns that would continue throughout the series. The heroes are shown as flawed, relatable beings rather than perfect paragons of virtue. Superman makes crude jokes, Wonder Woman participates in potentially compromising situations, and Robin appears distracted by things a young sidekick probably shouldn't be focused on. This humanization of superheroes would become a recurring theme, making these godlike figures feel more approachable and, in a strange way, more comforting. Season 2 brings us several memorable superhero moments, starting with Superman's appearance in Holy Crap. When Peter believes his failures as a son will send him to the afterlife's less pleasant neighborhood, we see Superman among the damned, having apparently killed someone over an insult about his speed. This dark twist on the Man of Steel's usually wholesome image is both shocking and oddly hilarious. It suggests that even the most morally upright heroes might have breaking points, which is strangely reassuring for those of us who struggle with our own moral shortcomings. The genius of this particular gag lies in its subversion of expectations. Superman is supposed to be the ultimate Boy Scout, the hero who always finds a way to save the day without compromising his values. Seeing him in this context creates cognitive dissonance that our brains find amusing. When you're trying to fall asleep, this kind of gentle surprise keeps your mind engaged just enough to distract from daily worries without being so stimulating that it keeps you fully awake. Spider-Man makes his first appearance in Season 2's Let's Go to the Hop, saving Lois when she attempts to sneak out of the house like a rebellious teenager. The web-slinger's famous line, "Everybody gets one," becomes a running gag throughout the series, creating a sense of continuity and familiarity that's perfect for our sleepy exploration. The idea that Spider-Man keeps track of saves and has a one-per-customer policy is absurdly bureaucratic for a superhero, which makes it perfectly suited to Family Guy's brand of humor. This Spider-Man appearance also establishes something important about the show's relationship with Marvel characters versus DC characters. While DC heroes often appear as flawed or corrupted versions of themselves, Marvel characters tend to be portrayed with their core characteristics intact, but placed in mundane or absurd situations. Spider-Man is still heroic and quip-heavy. He's just operating under arbitrary rules that make him seem like he's working for customer service rather than fighting crime. Season 3 introduces us to some of Superman's greatest villains when Lois encounters General Zod, Non, and Ursa in Lethal Weapons. After Lois becomes a martial arts expert, these Kryptonian criminals appear in a bar, only to be banished to the Phantom Zone using a conveniently placed prison that someone apparently just left lying around. The casual way these universe-threatening villains are dispatched speaks to Family Guy's approach to superhero lore. Nothing is too sacred to be made ridiculous. The Phantom Zone prison sitting in a random bar is particularly amusing because it raises so many questions. Who left it there? How many drunk patrons have accidentally fallen into it? Does the bartender know what it is, or does he just think it's an interesting piece of modern art? These unanswered questions create a sort of mental loop that's perfect for letting your mind wander as you prepare for sleep. Season 3 also gives us our first Batman villain reference with the Penguin's appearance in When You Wish Upon a Weinstein. The episode was temporarily banned, which adds an extra layer of intrigue to the Penguin's brief cameo. He appears in a synagogue, apparently embracing Catholic justice, which is both religiously confusing and hilariously specific. The Penguin has always been one of Batman's more refined villains, so seeing him in a house of worship fits his tendency toward grandiose gestures, even if the religious context doesn't quite match his usual Anglican background. Moving into Season 4, we discover that Peter was apparently once a Wonder Twin, which opens up a whole new dimension of superhero absurdity. The Wonder Twins, for those unfamiliar, were shape-shifting siblings from the old Super Friends cartoon, who could transform into various forms, one into animals, the other into water-based objects. Peter's transformation into the shape of Jaina's tampon is both completely inappropriate and perfectly in character for him. It's the kind of reference that works on multiple levels. It's funny because it's unexpected, because it's crude, and because it reveals Peter's fundamental misunderstanding of how to be heroic. The Wonder Twins reference also serves as a nostalgic callback to Saturday morning cartoons, which adds a layer of comfort and familiarity. Even if you never watched Super Friends, the concept of silly superhero transformations feels familiar and safe. When you're trying to fall asleep, these kinds of cultural touchstones help create a sense of security and continuity with your childhood experiences. Season 4 also reveals that Peter apparently once lived in the Fortress of Solitude with the Justice League, trying to address the really important issues like running low on Mr. Pibb and Cheetos. This domestic take on superhero headquarters is brilliantly mundane. Instead of focusing on cosmic threats or world-ending disasters, Peter's concerns are entirely practical and relatable. Everyone who's ever lived with roommates can understand the frustration of running out of snacks, even if those roommates happen to be the world's most powerful superheroes. The Fortress of Solitude scene works as sleep material because it takes something fantastical and makes it completely ordinary. Superman's crystalline palace becomes just another place where people argue about grocery shopping and household responsibilities. It's comforting to imagine that even in the most extraordinary circumstances, life still comes down to basic human needs and petty domestic disputes. Apache Chief makes his one and only appearance in Season 4's PTV, helping Peter install a satellite dish. As the narrator mentions in our reference material, Apache Chief holds the unique distinction of being the only character on this list who isn't actually from comic books but was created for the Super Friends television show. This makes his appearance both nostalgic and somewhat melancholic, as he represents a character who never quite achieved the lasting cultural impact of his more famous teammates. The image of Apache Chief reduced to helping with satellite installation is both funny and a little sad. Here's a character who once stood alongside the world's greatest heroes, now apparently working odd jobs to make ends meet. It's a commentary on how quickly popular culture moves on, leaving behind characters who were once beloved by children. When you're settling down for sleep, these kinds of bittersweet observations can be oddly comforting, reminding us that change is natural and that there's dignity in adaptation. Aquaman gets his first real character development in Season 4's The Father, the Son, and the Holy Fawns, where we see him lounging underwater, asking for beer and making practical observations about saltwater contamination. This version of Aquaman is refreshingly laid back, treating his underwater kingdom like a casual hangout spot rather than a realm to be protected. The humor comes from applying real-world concerns to a fantasy situation. Of course, drinking salt water wouldn't be ideal, even for someone who lives underwater. The relaxed Aquaman works well for sleep content because he embodies a kind of Zen acceptance of his situation. Instead of being driven by heroic purpose or cosmic responsibility, this version of the character is just enjoying life, asking for simple pleasures like beer and pointing out obvious problems that everyone else apparently overlooked. There's something peaceful about a superhero who's not stressed about saving the world and is instead focused on basic comfort and logical concerns. Season 4 also gives us Peter's confused mixing of superhero theme songs when he tries to seduce Lois with a Spider-Man impression but uses the Batman theme music. This kind of cultural cross-contamination is perfect for bedtime content because it reflects how our brains often blend memories and associations, especially when we're tired. The melody of one song attached to the words of another creates a dreamy, surreal quality that mirrors the way thoughts drift and combine as we fall asleep. The season concludes with Superman trying to flirt with Wonder Woman while she uses her invisible jet's restroom, which creates an awkward situation that's both hilarious and somewhat disturbing. The idea that invisible toilets would create privacy issues that even superheroes haven't figured out is the kind of logical problem that Family Guy excels at exploring. It takes the fantastical concept of invisible aircraft and applies practical concerns that any user would eventually encounter. Season 5 opens with Robin finally getting his own movie, which turns out to be just as anticlimactic as you might expect. The boy Wonder shows up to help but admits he only has a cell phone with no service, highlighting the gap between superhero aspirations and practical usefulness. This version of Robin represents every sidekick who's eager to help but not quite ready for prime time, which is both endearing and relatable. The show makes an interesting prediction about Iceman in Season 5's Airport 07, suggesting that his wife suspects him of being unfaithful based on an ice trail he's left behind. The wife's comment about knowing how to touch a man seemed like just another crude joke at the time, but it actually predicted the character's coming-out story in the comics nearly a decade later. This accidental prophecy shows how comedy sometimes stumbles onto truth by exploring possibilities that official stories haven't yet considered. The Iceman prediction is fascinating from a sleep perspective because it demonstrates how our subconscious minds often pick up on patterns and possibilities that our conscious minds haven't fully processed. Comedy writers, working from intuition and cultural observation, sometimes arrive at insights that more deliberate analysis might miss. When you're drifting off to sleep, your brain makes similar, unexpected connections, linking disparate ideas in ways that can be both illuminating and amusing. Season 5 also shows Peter harnessing Wonder Woman's power to find his real father in Ireland, which leads to the amusing image of Peter dressed as the Amazon princess while traveling to meet his Irish daddy. The incongruity of Peter in Wonder Woman's costume, particularly the Golden Eagle breastplate and star-spangled hot pants, creates a visual that's both absurd and oddly touching. Peter's enthusiasm for connecting with his heritage, even while dressed inappropriately, reflects a genuine desire for family connection. The Wonder Woman costume also serves as a gentle commentary on gender roles and expectations. Peter's comfort with wearing traditionally feminine heroic attire, while played for laughs, suggests a character who's not particularly concerned with conventional masculinity when he's pursuing something important to him. This kind of casual gender fluidity was relatively progressive for early 2000s television, even when presented as comedy. The Fantastic Four's thing makes an appearance in Season 5's Bill and Peter's Bogus Journey, losing his appendage to Lorena Bobbitt in what Lois describes as a bigger mistake than her affair with Bill Clinton. The reference to Bobbitt, who became infamous in the early 1990s for cutting off her husband's penis, creates a dark comedy moment that's both shocking and historically specific. The image of the thing searching desperately for his missing part while asking others to put on gloves before helping is grotesquely hilarious. This particular gag works for sleep content because it's so absurd that it bypasses normal emotional processing and goes straight to a kind of shocked laughter that releases tension. The combination of a beloved comic book character with a notorious real-world crime creates cognitive dissonance that can actually be relaxing because it's too strange to generate real anxiety or stress. Season 5's Meet the Quagmires introduces us to the Legion of Doom, complete with a full roster of classic villains including Giganta, Black Manta, Solomon Grundy, Bizarro, Scarecrow, Lex Luthor, Captain Cold, Sinestro, Cheetah, Brainiac, Gorilla Grodd, and Toyman. The joke centers on Solomon Grundy accidentally revealing their secret plot, which fits perfectly with his character as a somewhat simple-minded zombie monster. The Legion's headquarters, which apparently looks a lot like Darth Vader's helmet, creates an amusing connection between DC Comics and Star Wars that suggests shared design aesthetics across different fictional universes. The Legion of Doom scene is particularly effective as sleep material because it presents villainy as fundamentally disorganized and prone to simple mistakes. Instead of being truly threatening, these world-conquering criminals are portrayed as somewhat incompetent co-workers who can't keep a secret. This domestication of evil makes it less scary and more absurd, which is perfect for bedtime viewing. Spider-Man returns in Season 6 to make another save in Believe It or Not, Joe's Walking on Air, reminding Peter that everybody gets one, and confirming that Peter has already used his save. This callback creates continuity across seasons, while also establishing that Spider-Man operates under consistent rules, even when those rules are completely arbitrary. The idea that the web slinger maintains some kind of cosmic scoreboard of who deserves rescuing is both bureaucratic and oddly fair. The everybody gets one rule becomes more interesting the more you think about it. It implies that Spider-Man has the power to save everyone but chooses not to, which is either deeply philosophical or completely absurd, depending on your perspective. From a sleep standpoint, it's the kind of concept that your mind can explore without reaching any definitive conclusions, making it perfect for that drowsy state where thoughts drift and circle without necessarily resolving. Season 6 also presents the 5th Superman movie we never got, featuring the Man of Steel's reaction to discovering he's about to become a father, Superman's immediate impulse to flee to his destroyed home planet, and his suggestion that he and Lois should see other people, creates a hilariously unheroic response to impending parenthood. The joke works because it takes the most responsible hero in comics and shows him having the same panic response that many real people experience when faced with unexpected pregnancy. The non-existent Superman sequel serves as commentary on both superhero responsibility and real-world relationship dynamics. Even someone with godlike powers apparently isn't prepared for the ultimate responsibility of raising a child, which makes him more relatable, even as it makes him less heroic. This kind of character deflation is comforting because it suggests that even the most capable people struggle with life's major challenges. Dean Cain, who played Superman in the 1990s television series Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, appears as himself in Season 6, sitting on a park bench and apparently desperate for attention. This meta-reference acknowledges the actor's career trajectory, while also commenting on how quickly the entertainment industry moves on from even its biggest stars. The image of a former Superman reduced to park bench appearances is both cruel and oddly realistic. The Dean Cain cameo works as sleep material because it captures the melancholic quality of faded fame without being genuinely depressing. It's more wistful than tragic, acknowledging the temporary nature of celebrity while not being mean-spirited about it. When you're settling down for sleep, these kinds of gentle observations about the passage of time can be oddly comforting, reminding you that everyone experiences ups and downs in their careers and lives. Season 6's Back to the Woods gives us another Spider-Man reference, this time focusing on his romantic difficulties with a crude joke about his radioactive bodily fluids. The implication that Spider-Man's various emissions might not be safe for intimate partners is both scientifically logical and completely inappropriate. It's the kind of detail that makes perfect sense from a scientific standpoint while being absolutely horrifying from a practical relationship perspective. This particular Spider-Man joke works for sleep because it applies real-world logic to fantastical situations in a way that's both funny and slightly disturbing. Your brain can process the humor while also being mildly grossed out, creating a mental state that's engaged but not overstimulated. It's the kind of thought that's interesting enough to distract from daily worries, but weird enough that you don't want to dwell on it too long. Season 7 begins with Stewie's assessment of Aquaman's usefulness, pointing out that he's essentially useless for any crime that happens on land, which represents approximately 99% of all crimes. Aquaman's response, calling on his shark friends and producing about 5 fish, perfectly demonstrates the character's limitations outside his aquatic domain. The scene acknowledges what comic book fans have long joked about. Aquaman's power set is highly specialized to the point of being impractical for most superhero situations. The Aquaman critique is perfect for bedtime because it applies logical thinking to illogical situations. When you start thinking practically about superhero abilities, most of them fall apart pretty quickly. Aquaman can talk to fish, but how often would that actually be useful? It's the kind of rational analysis that's engaging but not stressful, making it ideal for that drowsy state where your mind wants something to chew on, but nothing too demanding. Season 7 also reveals that Commissioner Gordon uses Batman's signal for more than just crime emergencies, apparently including updates about his bowel movements. The joke that true friends are glad to know about their buddy's regular bowel movements creates an uncomfortably intimate picture of the Batman-Gordon relationship, while also commenting on the boundaries of friendship. It's crude but also oddly touching in its suggestion that these characters have moved beyond professional cooperation into genuine personal connection. The bathroom signal works as sleep humor because it's simultaneously gross and sweet. It acknowledges bodily functions while also celebrating friendship, creating a complexity that your drowsy brain can appreciate without being too challenged by it. It's the kind of joke that works on multiple levels without requiring deep analysis to be funny. Season 8 opens with the Griffins portrayed as the Justice League in a faithful recreation of the Super Friends cartoon opening. Peter appears as Superman, Brian and Stewie take on the Batman and Robin roles, Lois embodies Wonder Woman, Chris becomes Aquaman, and Meg is just Meg. This homage to the classic 70s cartoon creates a warm, nostalgic feeling, while also demonstrating the show's affection for its source material, even as it parodies it. The Super Friends opening recreation is perfect sleep material because it combines familiar visuals with comforting nostalgia. Even if you never watched the original Super Friends, the earnest heroic poses and dramatic narration create a sense of safety and righteousness that's ideal for bedtime. It represents a simpler time when heroes were clearly heroic and villains were obviously villainous, which can be very comforting in our more morally complex modern world. Season 8's Hannah Banana finally makes Aquaman useful by having Chris and his pet monkey turn him into a meal. The question of whether Aquaman would taste more like man or fish is both practical and disturbing, applying culinary curiosity to a beloved character in a way that's simultaneously logical and horrible. It's the kind of thought experiment that your brain finds interesting even as your conscience finds it appalling. The Aquaman meal scene works for sleep because it's so absurd that it doesn't generate real emotional investment. You're not actually worried about Aquaman being eaten because the situation is too ridiculous to take seriously. Instead, your brain can appreciate the logical progression of the joke while remaining emotionally detached from its implications. Later in Season 8, Peter declares Aquaman his hero and mentions his secret identity as Arthur Curry, which is barely a secret at all since he apparently just wears a suit as his civilian disguise. The joke that Clark Kent at least wears glasses while Arthur Curry just changes clothes highlights how some superhero secret identities are more convincing than others. It also raises practical questions about dry cleaning costs for someone who spends most of his time underwater. The Arthur Curry secret identity discussion is great for drowsy contemplation because it opens up a whole line of thinking about superhero logistics without being too demanding. How do these characters maintain their civilian lives? What are the practical considerations of being a superhero? These questions are interesting but not urgent, making them perfect for bedtime mental wandering. Season 9 gives us And I'm Joyce Kinney, which parodies The Incredible Hulk television series with Stewie as David Banner and Peter as his Hulk alter ego. The recreation of the classic TV intro, complete with gamma radiation experiments and the famous "You wouldn't like me when I'm angry" line, pays homage to one of the most memorable superhero television shows of the 1970s. The image of tiny Stewie transforming into massive Peter creates a visual gag that's both faithful to the source material and completely absurd. The Incredible Hulk parody works perfectly for sleep because it taps into childhood memories of after-school television while also providing gentle humor. The original show had a melancholic quality that was oddly soothing, and Family Guy's version captures that wistful mood while adding just enough absurdity to keep it light. It's nostalgic without being sad, funny without being overstimulating. Season 10 brings us Grumpy Old Man, with its accountant's perspective on the Hall of Justice's real estate costs. The practical concern that the Justice League's headquarters sits on 5 acres of commercial real estate raises legitimate questions about superhero financing. How do these teams afford their elaborate bases? Even with billionaire Bruce Wayne on the roster, the ongoing costs of maintaining a crystalline fortress would be astronomical. The Justice League real estate discussion is perfect for bedtime because it applies mundane concerns to fantastic situations. Instead of focusing on cosmic threats or world-ending disasters, it considers property taxes and maintenance costs. It's the kind of practical thinking that's engaging but not stressful, grounding fantastical concepts in everyday concerns that everyone can understand. Season 10 also features Quagmire doing his best Aquaman impression in Be Careful What You Fish For, attempting to help Peter's dolphin friend Billy reconcile with his wife. Quagmire's command of sea creatures is about as effective as you'd expect, producing confused looks rather than dramatic romantic gestures. The scene plays with expectations about what makes someone qualified to communicate with marine life, while also acknowledging that relationship counseling is difficult regardless of species. The Quagmire as Aquaman scene works for sleep because it combines familiar character dynamics with absurd situations. You know how Quagmire operates in normal circumstances, so seeing him attempt superheroics creates a comfortable kind of chaos. It's predictably unpredictable. If that makes sense, you know it won't work, but you can enjoy watching how it fails. Season 11's The Blind Side reveals that Stewie once easily found Batman's cave, suggesting that the Dark Knight's security isn't as impressive as it should be. The idea that you can't hire 60 workers to dig a cave under your house and expect them to keep it secret is both logical and hilarious. It also raises the disturbing suggestion that Batman should have eliminated the construction crew to protect his identity, which the show wisely presents as too extreme, even for the generally amoral Griffin family. The Batcave construction logistics work well for sleepy contemplation because they apply real-world employment concerns to superhero situations. How do you build a secret lair without compromising its secrecy? What are the labor relations implications of superhero architecture? These questions are interesting but not urgent, making them perfect for that drowsy state where your mind wants something to consider without working too hard. Season 11 also gives us Peter's throwdown with the Riddler and Killer Queen, presented through old-fashioned television censorship that blocks out the violence while making the audio crystal clear. This editing style, used to get around broadcast standards, creates a more disturbing effect than actually showing the violence would have achieved. The implication that Peter completely destroyed one of Batman's classic villains is both shocking and oddly satisfying. The censored Riddler fight works as sleep material because it plays with expectation and imagination rather than explicit content. Your brain fills in the blanks based on audio cues, but the actual violence remains abstract. It's engaging without being genuinely disturbing, creating just enough tension to be interesting without being overstimulating. Season 12 brings us a very brief Iron Man pun when Peter appears as Iron Man Chef during a tailgating scene. The visual gag combines Tony Stark's armor with culinary activities, creating a mashup that's both logical and absurd. Iron Man's suit would actually be quite useful for cooking. Built-in temperature control, multiple appendages for multitasking, and presumably some kind of timer system. It's the kind of practical application of superpowers that Family Guy excels at exploring. The Iron Man Chef concept is perfect for drowsy thinking because it's creative but not complex. You can imagine how the technology might work in a kitchen setting without having to work out complicated details. It's whimsical enough to be entertaining, but simple enough not to require deep analysis. Season 12 also presents a depressing episode of Superman where everyone has developed breast cancer from his X-ray vision, creating a dark commentary on the unintended consequences of superhero abilities. The idea that Superman's constant use of his powers might have harmful effects on the people around him is both scientifically logical and morally horrifying. It transforms the Man of Steel from humanity's greatest protector into an inadvertent threat to everyone he cares about. The Superman cancer storyline works for sleep because it's so absurd that it doesn't generate real anxiety while still being interesting enough to engage your attention. It's the kind of dark humor that acknowledges serious topics without dwelling on them, making it suitable for bedtime consumption. Your brain can process the irony without being genuinely disturbed by the implications. Season 13 gives us the Avengers questioning Black Widow's usefulness during Our Idiot Brian, with her kicking ability being dismissed as something everyone can do. This critique of Marvel's least powered Avenger reflects real fan discussions about how normal humans contribute to teams of gods and monsters. Black Widow's skills are impressive by human standards, but seem inadequate when compared to Thunder Gods and billionaire armored suits. The Black Widow critique is good for sleepy analysis because it raises questions about teamwork and specialization without being too demanding. What makes someone valuable to a group? How do you measure contributions when team members have vastly different abilities? These are interesting philosophical questions that don't require immediate answers, making them perfect for bedtime contemplation. Season 14 introduces Peter's professional wrestler sister, who Quagmire describes as being as strong as Superman is on a date, implying that the Man of Steel might not always be gentle with his romantic partners. This dark suggestion about Superman's love life creates an uncomfortable image of Earth's greatest hero, while also commenting on the practical difficulties of superhuman strength in intimate situations. The Superman dating joke works for sleep because it's shocking enough to be memorable, but abstract enough not to be genuinely disturbing. It acknowledges the physical realities of superhuman abilities while keeping the actual implications vague enough to avoid being truly upsetting. It's dark humor that doesn't dwell on its darker implications. Season 15 finally gives us Mayor Adam West in his iconic Batman costume, acknowledging the actor's most famous role, while also paying tribute to his contribution to superhero entertainment. West's portrayal of Batman in the 1960s television series created a camp sensibility that influenced decades of superhero media. His appearance in costume serves as both nostalgia and recognition of his cultural impact. The Adam West Batman appearance is perfect for bedtime because it combines comfort and recognition. Even viewers who never saw the original Batman series recognize the iconic costume and understand its significance. It's a moment of pure fan service that doesn't require extensive knowledge to appreciate, making it accessible and warming. Season 16 gives us a different spin on Captain America. Civil War with the addition of Randy, Peter's college friend who apparently lives in his guest house. The inclusion of this completely ordinary person among Marvel's greatest heroes creates an absurd dynamic that plays with audience expectations about superhero team composition. Randy's presence raises questions about qualification and inclusion that the actual movie never addressed. The Randy addition to Civil War works as sleep material because it's so random that it bypasses logical analysis and goes straight to absurd humor. Your brain doesn't need to work hard to understand why it's funny. The incongruity is immediately apparent and doesn't require deeper consideration. It's simple absurdity that's perfect for drowsy appreciation. Season 16 also gives us Peter as Deadpool, or Red Stool, as he calls himself, recreating the highway scene from the first Deadpool movie, but with more songs about anatomy. The comparison between Peter and Deadpool makes sense. Both are fourth-wall-breaking wisecrackers who operate outside normal social boundaries. Peter's version focuses more on musical numbers and less on violence, making it more family-friendly while maintaining the irreverent spirit. The Peter as Deadpool scene works for sleep because it combines familiar characters with familiar scenes in unexpected ways. You know how both Peter and Deadpool operate, so seeing them merged creates a comfortable kind of chaos. It's predictable in its unpredictability, which is oddly soothing when you're trying to wind down. Season 17 brings us Herbert's return from apparent death, mimicking Groot's resurrection from Guardians of the Galaxy. The parallel between Marvel's beloved tree character and Family Guy's creepy old neighbor creates an uncomfortable comparison that's both funny and disturbing. Herbert's dancing at the end of the episode directly references Baby Groot's adorable dance moves, creating a mashup that nobody asked for, but somehow works. The Herbert as Groot scene is effective for sleep because it's so weird that it creates a kind of cognitive overload that can actually be relaxing. Your brain struggles to process the comparison between these vastly different characters, eventually giving up and just accepting the absurdity. It's the kind of strange humor that works best when you're not thinking too hard about it. Season 18 gives us Ghost Rider appearing at a monster truck rally and gun show, suggesting that even supernatural characters need to make ends meet somehow. The image of Johnny Blaze performing at what amounts to a supernatural variety show is both sad and hilarious. It acknowledges that even the most dramatic characters need to pay bills and maintain careers outside their heroic activities. The Ghost Rider appearance works for bedtime because it applies mundane concerns to supernatural situations. Even beings of vengeance need to make money somehow, apparently. It's the kind of practical consideration that grounds fantastical concepts in everyday reality, making them more relatable and less intimidating. Season 18 also features Batman getting annoyed by the misuse of his signal when Lois accidentally activates it while playing with a lamp. The Dark Knight's irritated response to false alarms creates a domestic problem out of superhero logistics. It suggests that even the most serious heroes have to deal with technical difficulties and user error, making them more human and relatable. The bat signal misuse scene is perfect for sleep because it takes cosmic heroics and reduces them to the level of household appliance problems. Batman's annoyance feels familiar to anyone who's ever been bothered by false alarms or technical glitches. It's relatable frustration that doesn't require superhero knowledge to understand. Season 19 gives us Peter carving Groot out of wood with his chainsaw, creating a DIY version of the beloved Marvel character. Peter's artistic interpretation of the Guardians of the Galaxy member reduces cosmic heroism to suburban craft projects. The fact that Joe recognizes the character despite it being from that Marvel movie shows how thoroughly superhero culture has penetrated mainstream consciousness. The wooden Groot scene works for drowsy viewing because it combines creativity with familiarity. Everyone understands the satisfaction of completing a craft project and seeing a cosmic hero reduced to chainsaw. Art makes him more approachable. It's wholesome absurdity that's perfect for bedtime consumption. Season 20 gives us Superman set in Boston, with Clark speaking in an exaggerated accent that makes him barely comprehensible. The idea of relocating iconic characters to different cultural contexts creates humor through contrast and familiarity. Boston Superman retains his heroic impulses but expresses them through regional speech patterns that make him seem like a completely different person. The Boston Superman scene is great for sleep because it plays with linguistic humor without requiring deep cultural knowledge. Even if you're not familiar with Boston accents, the contrast between Superman's usual earnestness and his regional speech patterns creates obvious comedy. It's simple wordplay that works without demanding too much attention. Our journey through Family Guy's superhero universe concludes with Season 20's recreation of General Zod's trial from the 1978 Superman movie, complete with Lois being judged by the High Court of Krypton for drug-related offenses. The scene faithfully recreates the visual elements of the classic film while applying them to completely mundane modern problems. Lois's confusion about the reference adds a layer of meta-humor that acknowledges not everyone gets every pop culture reference. The Kryptonian trial scene works perfectly as our finale because it brings us full circle to Superman, the character who appeared in Family Guy's very first superhero reference. It also demonstrates how the show has evolved from simple sight gags to more complex recreations of iconic scenes. The fact that Lois doesn't recognize the reference reminds us that not everyone shares the same cultural background, making these moments of recognition feel special when they do connect. As we reach the end of our sleepy exploration, it's worth considering what makes Family Guy's superhero references so consistently effective as bedtime material. These characters represent our hopes and fears made manifest, but Family Guy strips away their cosmic significance and reduces them to human scale. Superman worries about bathroom breaks, Batman deals with signal malfunctions, and Spider-Man operates under arbitrary bureaucratic rules. This domestication of the fantastic creates a unique kind of comfort. These gods among men become relatable neighbors with superpowers, dealing with the same mundane problems that we all face. When you're lying in bed, trying to quiet the anxieties and stresses of daily life, there's something deeply soothing about imagining that even the most powerful beings in fiction struggle with ordinary concerns. The repetitive nature of these references also creates a sense of continuity and familiarity that's perfect for sleep. Spider-Man always reminds people that everybody gets one. Aquaman is consistently portrayed as limited in scope, and Superman regularly appears in situations that diminish his godlike status. This consistency creates expectations that are reliably met, providing the kind of predictable comfort that helps quiet an active mind. Family Guy's superhero universe also works as sleep material because it operates on dream logic rather than narrative logic. Characters appear when they're needed for a joke, disappear when they're no longer useful, and return with no explanation of where they've been or why they're back. This episodic approach mirrors how our minds work when we're drifting off to sleep, making random connections and following trains of thought that don't necessarily lead anywhere logical. The show's irreverent treatment of these cultural icons also serves a psychological function. By making fun of characters who represent perfection and unattainable ideals, Family Guy gives us permission to laugh at our own impossible standards and unrealistic expectations. When Superman can't handle unexpected pregnancy news or Batman gets annoyed by false alarms, it reminds us that everyone struggles with life's challenges, even fictional paragons of virtue. The gentle absurdity of these scenarios creates a mental state that's engaged but not anxious, interested but not overstimulated. Your brain has something to focus on other than daily worries, but nothing so compelling that it prevents relaxation. It's the perfect balance for bedtime entertainment, engaging enough to distract from stress, familiar enough to feel comfortable, and absurd enough to bypass critical analysis. The evolution of these references throughout the show's run also tells a story about how superhero culture has changed over the decades. Early appearances were simple sight gags and quick references, but later seasons feature more complex homages and detailed recreations of iconic scenes. This progression reflects both the show's growing confidence and the increasing sophistication of superhero media in general. As superhero movies became major cultural events, Family Guy's references became more elaborate and specific. The show's treatment of these characters serves as a kind of cultural barometer, showing how our relationship with these fictional heroes has evolved from niche interest to mainstream obsession. When you're falling asleep to these references, you're also drifting through decades of cultural change and shared experience. The comfort provided by these superhero appearances goes beyond simple nostalgia or recognition. They represent a shared cultural language that connects us to childhood memories, Saturday morning cartoons, comic book shops, and movie theaters filled with excited audiences. Even when Family Guy subverts or mocks these characters, it's doing so from a place of affection and familiarity that acknowledges their importance in our collective imagination. In our modern world of uncertainty and change, these fictional characters provide stable reference points that remain consistent even as everything else shifts around them. Superman will always stand for truth and justice, even when he's portrayed as romantically incompetent. Batman will always be prepared for anything, even when he's annoyed by false alarms. Spider-Man will always help people, even when he's operating under arbitrary rules about who deserves saving. This stability makes them perfect companions for sleep, when our minds need to let go of the day's complexities and find peace in simple, familiar concepts. The superheroes of Family Guy aren't the cosmic forces of their source material, but they're reliable in their unreliability, consistently absurd in ways that make them more human and accessible. As you drift off to sleep with these gentle absurdities floating through your mind, remember that sometimes the best way to find peace is through laughter, and sometimes the most comforting thing about heroes is discovering that they're just as confused and imperfect as the rest of us. In the end, that's what makes Family Guy's superhero universe so perfect for bedtime. It takes our most powerful cultural figures and reminds us that power doesn't exempt anyone from life's beautiful, ridiculous complexity. Sweet dreams. And remember, everybody gets one, so make yours count. Welcome to tonight's Family Guy Deep Dive, where we explore the shadowy corners of Quahog and uncover the forgotten characters who made their mark in just one episode. Tonight, we're diving into the twisted tales of temporary troublemakers, fleeting friends, and memorable menaces that crossed paths with the Griffin family only once, but left lasting impressions on fans everywhere. Family Guy has given us over 400 episodes across more than 2 decades. And while we all know and love the core cast, some of the most fascinating characters are the ones who appeared for just 22 minutes and then vanished into television history. These aren't your typical throwaway gags or background extras. These are fully realized characters with their own motivations, quirks, and sometimes terrifying agendas that make you wonder what might have happened if they'd stuck around longer. What makes these one-time appearances so captivating is how they often serve as dark mirrors to our beloved main characters. They show us alternate versions of what Stewie, Brian, or Peter might become under different circumstances, or they reveal hidden aspects of the Griffins we never knew existed. Some arrive as allies who become enemies, others start as threats and become unlikely saviors, and a few manage to be both simultaneously. Let's start with one of the most memorable antagonists in Family Guy history. Evil Stewie, the malevolent clone who emerged from Stewie's desperate attempt to reclaim his villainous edge. In The Hand That Rocks the Wheelchair, we witness Stewie grappling with an identity crisis that many long-running animated characters face. After years of character development, the once murderous baby genius had become, well, less murderous and arguably less of a genius when it came to world domination schemes. The episode begins with Stewie getting humiliated in the sandbox by a bigger kid, a scenario that would have once triggered an elaborate revenge plot involving death, raise, and world conquest. Instead, modern Stewie just wants to handle things like a gentleman, building a rifle with care and precision while humming to himself. It's almost endearing how methodical he's become, even in his attempts at intimidation. But Brian makes an astute observation about how Stewie has lost his edge over the years, no longer using phrases like "damn you" or actively trying to blow things up. This criticism cuts deep because it forces Stewie to confront how much he's changed. In response, he constructs what he calls a concentrated neural enhancement device, designed to artificially boost his evil side back to its former glory. The machine itself is a testament to Stewie's continued brilliance, even if his applications have become less sinister. But like many of Stewie's inventions, it works in an unexpected way. Rather than simply making Stewie more evil, the device extracts all of his malevolent impulses and creates a separate entity, Evil Stewie, or EATS, as he's temporarily dubbed, represents everything that original Stewie used to be, amplified to terrifying degrees. Where original Stewie once had moments of humanity that tempered his cruelty, Evil Stewie is pure malice without any redeeming qualities whatsoever. The visual design of Evil Stewie is particularly clever, using a simple color palette swap to create an immediate sense of wrongness. He looks like Stewie, but wrong, like looking at a photographed negative. This design choice reinforces the idea that he's not just another character, but specifically the dark reflection of our familiar baby genius. Evil Stewie's first acts involve tormenting Brian in ways that are both creative and genuinely disturbing. He doesn't just attack physically, he psychologically manipulates situations to cause maximum distress. When he bites Brian's tail, it's not just violence for violence's sake. It's calculated cruelty designed to establish dominance and create fear. The way he casually discusses what dog tail tastes like while Brian writhes in pain shows a level of detached sadism that goes beyond anything original Stewie ever displayed. The rampage that follows showcases Evil Stewie's complete lack of moral restraints. He attacks the Kool-Aid Man, an act that's simultaneously absurd and horrifying. The Kool-Aid Man has been bursting through walls for decades, causing property damage wherever he goes, yet no one ever held him accountable. Evil Stewie's assault on this beloved advertising mascot serves as both dark comedy and a commentary on how we accept destructive behavior when it's familiar and cheerful. What makes Evil Stewie truly terrifying isn't just his actions, but his intelligence. He retains all of Stewie's tactical brilliance while abandoning any moral framework that might limit his choices. When Stewie and Brian attempt to trap him at the park, Evil Stewie immediately recognizes it as a setup and turns the situation to his advantage. His comment about it being a gift reveals how he views every encounter as an opportunity for sadism rather than genuine conflict. The fight scene between the two Stewies becomes almost symbolic, representing the internal struggle between growth and regression that many people face. As they wrestle for control of the weapon, tearing each other's clothes in the process, it's impossible not to see this as a metaphor for psychological conflict made literal. Stewie is literally fighting his own worst impulses, given physical form and independent will. The resolution comes down to Brian having to choose between two identical figures, each claiming to be the real Stewie. This scenario has become a trope in science fiction, but Family Guy handles it with characteristic cleverness. The solution isn't based on secret knowledge or hidden scars, but on something more fundamental: childlike wonder. Original Stewie's ability to find mystery and fascination in simple things like feet reveals the humanity that Evil Stewie lacks entirely. Brian's decision to shoot Evil Stewie is presented as heroic, but there's something deeply unsettling about watching someone destroy what amounts to a part of Stewie's personality. It raises questions about whether we truly want our favorite characters to grow and change, or whether we prefer them frozen in their most entertaining but potentially destructive forms. The episode's exploration of identity and personal growth resonates on multiple levels. Stewie's journey from would-be world conqueror to more domesticated baby genius mirrors the way many people abandon their youthful ambitions, sometimes wondering if they've lost something essential about themselves in the process. Evil Stewie represents the dangerous allure of regression, the temptation to return to simpler times when moral complexities didn't constrain our actions. Moving from Stewie's dark reflection to his genetic sibling, we encounter Boston Stewie in the appropriately titled Boston Stewie. This episode explores themes of family, abandonment, and cultural identity through the lens of Stewie discovering he has a half-brother created from one of Lois's donated eggs. The setup immediately raises questions about modern reproductive technology and the unexpected families it can create. Boston Stewie represents everything original Stewie might have become under different circumstances. Where our Stewie developed refined tastes and British sensibilities despite being raised in Rhode Island, Boston Stewie embodies every stereotype about Massachusetts residents turned up to 11. His first words establish him as crude, aggressive, and unapologetically confrontational, yet there's something endearing about his authenticity. The contrast between the two babies is immediately apparent and consistently hilarious. Original Stewie's sophisticated vocabulary and cultural references bounce off Boston Stewie's street-smart aggression and working-class sensibilities. When Boston Stewie sees Stewie's crazy straws and immediately identifies them as belonging to the fat man, it shows how quickly he sizes up social dynamics and hierarchies. Boston Stewie's backstory adds emotional depth to what could have been a simple comedy premise. His abandonment at an orphanage and subsequent lack of adoption speaks to real issues within the foster care system, while his defensive attitude masks genuine vulnerability. His aggression isn't just personality. It's armor developed to survive rejection and institutional neglect. The episode uses Boston Stewie to explore how environment shapes personality. Despite sharing genetic material with Stewie, his upbringing on Boston streets has created someone almost entirely different. His approach to conflict is direct and physical, while original Stewie prefers elaborate schemes and psychological manipulation. Yet both share intelligence and determination, suggesting that core traits persist regardless of circumstances. Stewie's attempt to civilize his brother for the adoption fair becomes a commentary on social expectations and conformity. The alphabet scene, where Boston Stewie turns every letter into profanity, illustrates how deeply ingrained his worldview has become. He's not just being difficult, he genuinely sees the world through a lens shaped by hardship and survival. The adoption fair sequence provides both humor and genuine pathos. Boston Stewie's passionate defense of the Patriots football team, even in an inappropriate setting, shows his loyalty and passion. These aren't negative traits, but they don't fit the sanitized image most adoptive parents seek. The tragedy isn't that Boston Stewie is unlovable, but that the system fails to recognize his positive qualities beneath his rough exterior. The resolution, with Boston Stewie finding a family of equally passionate Patriots fans, feels both satisfying and realistic. Rather than forcing him to change, the episode suggests that everyone deserves to find people who accept them as they are. The women who adopt him aren't trying to fix or improve him. They celebrate the same intense loyalty that made him seem unadoptable to others. Boston Stewie's single appearance raises intriguing questions about nature versus nurture while providing genuine laughs and unexpected emotional moments. His friendship with original Stewie, brief though it is, shows how family bonds can transcend cultural differences and personal circumstances. From sibling bonds to deadly pets, we encounter Sheldon, the murderous turtle, in Lois Comes Out of Her Shell. This episode takes the innocent concept of a child's first pet and transforms it into a psychological thriller that wouldn't be out of place in a horror movie. Sheldon represents the dark side of the human-animal bond, where affection becomes obsession and care becomes control. The episode begins with Stewie's accidental acquisition of Sheldon during a park visit with Lois. The turtle's first appearance is deliberately misleading, presenting him as a harmless, even pitiful creature. Stewie's immediate affection for the animal seems natural and healthy. representing his capacity for nurturing relationships with creatures smaller and more vulnerable than himself. However, subtle signs of Sheldon's malevolent nature begin appearing almost immediately. The disappearance of Robert's eye, initially dismissed as Brian's jealousy-driven destruction, marks the beginning of a pattern of escalating violence. The way the family rationalizes away these warning signs reflects how people often ignore red flags in relationships, preferring comfortable explanations to disturbing truths. Sheldon's methodology reveals a calculating intelligence that makes him genuinely frightening. He doesn't simply attack randomly. He orchestrates situations to maximize psychological impact while maintaining plausible deniability. The razor blade bookmark represents his ability to transform innocent objects into weapons, while the substitution of Brian's alcohol with flat diet soda shows his understanding of his victim's specific vulnerabilities. The bookshelf incident serves as the episode's turning point, where Sheldon's murderous intent becomes undeniable. Yet even then, Stewie struggles to accept the reality of his pet's nature. This reluctance to acknowledge the threat reflects how difficult it can be to abandon emotional investments, even when they become dangerous. Sheldon's final confrontation with Stewie transforms from pet relationship to genuine warfare. The turtle's ability to remove his shell, supposedly impossible in reality, emphasizes his supernatural level of hatred and determination. His naked appearance becomes genuinely disturbing, transforming him from cute pet to alien threat. The resolution, with Mario-style shell jumping, provides comic relief while acknowledging video game tropes about turtle enemies. Yet there's something unsettling about reducing Sheldon to a game reference, as if his genuine menace can only be defeated by treating him as fictional rather than real. Sheldon's characterization as pure malevolence without clear motivation makes him uniquely disturbing among Family Guy villains. Most antagonists have understandable goals or grievances, but Sheldon simply exists to cause suffering. This absence of rationality makes him more frightening than more elaborate villains with complex schemes. The episode uses Sheldon to explore themes of responsibility and the dangerous allure of exotic pets. Stewie's inability to control his chosen companion reflects real-world issues with people acquiring animals they can't properly manage. The turtle's transformation from beloved pet to mortal enemy serves as a cautionary tale about the unpredictability of wild creatures, no matter how domesticated they might appear. Moving from murderous pets to protective caregivers, we encounter Natalia in Nanny Goats. This episode flips expectations by presenting what initially appears to be a simple child care story and transforming it into an action thriller that showcases the lengths people will go to protect children, even those who aren't their own. Natalia's introduction immediately establishes her as different from typical Family Guy characters. Her thick Belarusian accent and matter-of-fact approach to childcare create an impression of competence mixed with cultural unfamiliarity. Her question about favorite breakfast fish and her bedtime story modifications hint at a background far more complex than typical domestic help. The revelation that Natalia is being hunted by mercenaries transforms the entire episode's dynamic. What seemed like cultural quirks suddenly become survival skills, and her unconventional childcare methods take on new meaning as protective measures. Her ability to instantly shift from caregiver to warrior suggests a depth of experience that goes far beyond typical nanny training. The action sequences that follow showcased Natalia's remarkable combat skills while maintaining focus on her protective instincts toward the Griffin children. She doesn't fight for glory or revenge. Every action is calculated to keep Stewie, Meg, and Chris safe from harm. Her willingness to use Stewie as a human shield sounds callous but reflects tactical thinking designed to maximize survival odds for all parties involved. Natalia's decision to have Stewie parachute to safety while she draws the mercenaries away demonstrates her strategic thinking and self-sacrifice. She's willing to face unknown dangers alone rather than risk the children's lives, showing how quickly she's bonded with her temporary charges. Her matter-of-fact delivery of survival instructions to a 1-year-old reflects both practical necessity and touching faith in Stewie's abilities. The episode never fully explains why Natalia is being hunted, or what she did in Belarus to earn such dedicated enemies. This ambiguity makes her more intriguing while avoiding the need to justify or condemn her past actions. She exists in the present as someone willing to risk everything for innocent children, regardless of what brought her to that point. Natalia's abrupt departure at the episode's end feels both realistic and melancholy. She's too dangerous to remain with a normal family, yet her brief time with the Griffins revealed her capacity for genuine affection and care. Her final appearance, presumably still fighting off Belarusian hit squads, suggests a life of constant danger that makes normal relationships impossible. The character of Natalia raises questions about redemption and the possibility of escaping one's past. Her skills suggest a violent history, yet her interactions with the Griffin children reveal deep humanity and protective instincts. The episode presents her as heroic, without fully absolving her of whatever crimes led to her current situation. From international intrigue to domestic comedy, we encounter new Brian in The Man with Two Brians. This episode explores themes of aging, replacement, and the fear of becoming obsolete through the introduction of a younger, supposedly superior version of the Griffin family dog. New Brian's characterization as aggressively pleasant creates immediate unease. His constant positivity and eagerness to please feel artificial, like an artificial intelligence programmed to be likable rather than genuine personality traits. His offer to turn off Brian's alarm clock and wake him gently represents the kind of thoughtfulness that seems too good to be true. The episode uses new Brian to explore Brian's insecurities about aging and relevance. At 8 years old, Brian is indeed approaching senior status for a dog, and his lifestyle of drinking and smoking has likely accelerated the aging process. New Brian represents everything Brian used to be: energetic, optimistic, and eager to please the Griffin family. Peter's introduction of New Brian reveals his characteristic inability to handle emotional complexity. Rather than addressing Brian's aging directly, he attempts to soften the blow by providing a replacement before the original is gone. This approach reflects how people often avoid difficult conversations about mortality and change, preferring to present solutions rather than acknowledge problems. New Brian's interactions with the family members showcase his calculated appeal to each person's specific desires. He provides Meg with validation, offers Chris entertainment, and gives Lois the helpful companion she's always wanted. His success in winning over the family isn't based on genuine connection, but on his ability to be exactly what each person wants him to be. The contrast between New Brian's artificial perfection and original Brian's authentic flaws becomes the episode's central tension. Brian's jealousy is understandable, but also reveals his own shortcomings. He spent years taking the Griffin family for granted, assuming his position was secure regardless of his behavior or contributions. Brian's decision to leave the family rather than compete with New Brian shows both pride and genuine hurt. His departure isn't just about being replaced. It's about feeling unloved and unappreciated after years of loyalty. The family's lukewarm response to his leaving confirms his worst fears about his dispensability. New Brian's ultimate fate, being chopped up and disposed of by Stewie, provides dark comedy while removing the threat he represented. Yet there's something disturbing about how easily the family accepts his disappearance, suggesting that their affection for him was indeed as superficial as it appeared. The episode's resolution, with Brian's return to the family, feels somewhat unearned. The Griffins don't really change their behavior or acknowledge their treatment of Brian. They simply accept his return because New Brian is no longer available. This suggests that Brian's position in the family is secure mainly due to familiarity rather than genuine appreciation. New Brian serves as a commentary on how people often claim to want perfection, but ultimately prefer familiarity and authenticity. His artificial pleasantness becomes tiresome precisely because it lacks the genuine flaws and complexities that make relationships meaningful. From replacement pets to family secrets, we encounter Karen, Peter's wrestling sister, in Peter's Sister. This episode explores sibling rivalry, childhood trauma, and the long-term effects of bullying through the lens of Peter's complicated relationship with his professional wrestler sister. Karen's introduction immediately establishes her as a physical threat to Peter. Her casual violence toward him during their reunion isn't playful sibling roughhousing, but genuine aggression that has persisted into adulthood. Her ability to dominate Peter physically and psychologically reveals dynamics that likely began in childhood and never resolved. The episode uses Karen to explore how childhood bullying can shape adult relationships and self-perception. Peter's fear of his sister isn't just about physical pain. It's about returning to a powerless state he thought he'd escaped. Karen's presence reduces him to the helpless child he once was, unable to assert himself or demand respect. Karen's professional wrestling career adds another layer to her characterization. Her success in a traditionally male-dominated field suggests competence and determination. Yet her inability to separate professional aggression from family relationships reveals emotional immaturity. She applies wrestling mentality to every interaction, treating family gatherings like competitive matches. The family's reaction to Karen reveals how people often enable bullying behavior by treating it as harmless fun. Lois's dismissal of Peter's concerns and the children's entertainment at his expense show how victims of family bullying often receive little support from other relatives. The normalization of Karen's violence toward Peter reflects broader social tendencies to minimize sibling abuse. Peter's decision to confront Karen in a wrestling ring provides both literal and metaphorical resolution to their conflict. By meeting her on her own terms, he forces her to acknowledge him as an equal rather than a victim. The physical confrontation becomes necessary because Karen only understands and respects force. The fight sequence between Peter and Karen allows both characters to express years of accumulated resentment and pain. Peter's ability to hold his own against a professional wrestler feels unrealistic, but symbolically important. He needed to prove to himself and Karen that he's no longer the helpless child she once tormented. Karen's eventual recognition of Peter as worthy of respect comes only after he demonstrates his willingness to fight back. This resolution suggests that some bullies only understand strength and will, continue their behavior until confronted with consequences. However, it also raises questions about whether violence is truly necessary for such resolutions. The episode's connection between Peter's treatment of Meg and his own experiences with Karen provides psychological insight into cycles of abuse. Peter's acknowledgement that he's been projecting his own victimization onto Meg shows rare self-awareness and suggests the possibility of breaking destructive patterns. Karen's characterization as both villain and victim reflects the complexity of family relationships. Her aggression toward Peter likely stems from her own childhood experiences and the competitive environment that shaped her personality. The episode avoids simple moral judgments, presenting her as flawed, but not irredeemably evil. Finally, we encounter Pearl Burton in And I'm Joyce Kinney, where Brian discovers love with an elderly woman who represents everything he thought he didn't want in a romantic partner. This episode explores themes of prejudice, unexpected connection, and the transformative power of genuine compatibility. Pearl's initial presentation as a bitter, hostile elderly woman creates strong first impressions that Brian must overcome. Her use of delousing powder and harsh criticisms of everything around her make her seem like a stereotypical curmudgeon. Yet these defensive behaviors mask deep hurt and decades of disappointment. The revelation of Pearl's past as a famous jingle singer adds depth to her character while explaining her current isolation. Her failed attempt to transition from commercial music to opera represents dreams deferred and artistic ambitions crushed by industry prejudice. Her retreat from public life becomes understandable as self-protection rather than antisocial behavior. Brian's initial revulsion toward Pearl reflects his own shallow priorities and ageist assumptions. His preference for young, attractive partners has consistently led to unsatisfying relationships, yet he continues pursuing the same type of woman. Pearl forces him to confront whether his romantic failures stem from choosing partners based on superficial criteria. The development of Brian and Pearl's relationship demonstrates how genuine compatibility transcends physical attraction and age differences. Their shared love of literature, music, and intellectual conversation creates a connection Brian has never experienced with his typical romantic interests. Pearl appreciates Brian's intelligence and creativity rather than simply tolerating his pretensions. Pearl's reluctance to leave her house reflects the way long-term isolation can become self-perpetuating. Her fear of the outside world has kept her safe from further disappointment, but also prevented her from experiencing joy or connection. Brian's encouragement represents both opportunity and risk for someone who has been hurt by public rejection. The musical sequence where Brian educates Pearl about changes in the modern world serves multiple purposes. It showcases Seth MacFarlane's vocal talents while demonstrating Brian's genuine desire to share experiences with Pearl. The song becomes an act of love, helping her reconnect with a world she's avoided for decades. Pearl's death shortly after their day together provides both tragedy and fulfillment. While their time together is brief, it represents the kind of meaningful connection that can justify years of loneliness. Her assertion that this was the best day of her life gives weight to their relationship despite its brevity. The virtual reality sequence at Pearl's deathbed offers both technological marvel and emotional authenticity. Rather than simply accepting death, they create a shared fantasy that allows them to experience the lifetime together they'll never have in reality. This sequence suggests that love can transcend physical limitations and temporal constraints. Pearl's impact on Brian extends beyond their romantic connection to challenge his fundamental assumptions about relationships and compatibility. She represents the possibility of finding love based on intellectual and emotional connection rather than physical attraction or social status. Yet Brian's return to his previous dating patterns after her death suggests how difficult it can be to maintain such insights without ongoing reinforcement. These one-off characters each serve specific narrative functions while creating memorable impressions that linger long after their episodes end. Evil Stewie forces Stewie to confront his own moral evolution, while Boston Stewie explores nature versus nurture through genetic similarity and cultural differences. Sheldon transforms pet ownership into psychological horror, while Natalia reveals heroism in unexpected places. New Brian challenges assumptions about improvement and replacement, while Karen forces Peter to confront his own capacity for bullying. Pearl demonstrates that love can emerge from the most unlikely circumstances when people connect on deeper levels than physical attraction or social compatibility. What makes these characters particularly effective is their ability to reveal hidden aspects of the main characters. Through temporary relationships and conflicts, we see sides of Stewie, Brian, and Peter that regular episodes might never explore. Evil Stewie shows us what Stewie might become without moral growth, while Pearl reveals Brian's capacity for selfless love. The temporary nature of these characters also allows the show to explore darker or more complex themes without committing to long-term consequences. Evil Stewie can be genuinely threatening because he'll be gone by episode's end. Natalia can have a mysterious, violent past because she won't stick around long enough to require detailed explanation. These characters often represent roads not taken or alternative possibilities for the main cast. Boston Stewie shows what Stewie might have become under different circumstances, while New Brian represents an idealized version of pet ownership that proves ultimately unsatisfying. They serve as mirrors that reflect both the strengths and limitations of our familiar characters. The emotional impact of these one-episode appearances often exceeds that of recurring characters precisely because of their brevity. We know from the beginning that these relationships are temporary, which intensifies their emotional resonance. Pearl's death feels more poignant because we know this is her only chance to find happiness. The variety among these characters also demonstrates Family Guy's versatility in handling different genres and tones. Evil Stewie brings horror elements, Natalia introduces action thriller conventions, while Pearl provides genuine romantic drama. Each character pushes the show in directions it might not normally explore. Their absence from subsequent episodes often feels appropriate rather than wasteful. Evil Stewie's death resolves Stewie's identity crisis. Boston Stewie's adoption provides closure to his abandonment issues, and Pearl's passing gives her story natural completion. Some stories are better told once and concluded definitively than drawn out across multiple episodes. The craft involved in creating memorable characters who appear for just 22 minutes demonstrates sophisticated storytelling techniques. Each character must establish personality, motivation, and emotional stakes quickly while serving the episode's larger themes. They can't rely on audience familiarity or extended development time. These one-off appearances also serve as testing grounds for ideas and character types that might not work in longer forms. They allow writers to experiment with extreme personalities or unusual situations without committing to extended story arcs. Some concepts work better as brief encounters than sustained relationships. The legacy of these characters extends beyond their individual episodes through fan discussions, references, and speculation about what might have happened if they'd returned. They become part of Family Guy mythology despite their limited screen time, proving that memorable characterization doesn't require extended exposure. Looking at these characters collectively reveals patterns in how Family Guy approaches temporary relationships and their impact on the main cast. They often serve as catalysts for character growth or self-reflection, forcing main characters to confront aspects of themselves they might otherwise avoid examining. The show's willingness to create fully realized characters for single episodes demonstrates respect for both the medium and the audience. Rather than relying solely on familiar faces and established relationships, these episodes invest in new possibilities and fresh dynamics. Whether serving as dark reflections, unlikely allies, or brief loves, these one-time characters prove that meaningful storytelling doesn't require extended time frames. Sometimes the most powerful relationships are those that burn brightly and briefly, leaving permanent impressions on both characters and viewers long after they've disappeared from our screens.
You know that feeling when you're lying in bed scrolling through endless videos trying to find something that'll help you drift off to sleep? Most people go for rain sounds or meditation videos, but there's this weird corner of the internet that's discovered something completely unexpected: Family Guy lore videos. And honestly, it makes perfect sense once you think about it. Picture this: Peter Griffin's bumbling voice rambling about some ridiculous backstory while you slowly fade into dreamland. It's like having that one friend who tells really long, meandering stories that somehow become the perfect background noise for sleep. But here's the thing: Family Guy isn't just random jokes and cutaway gags. There's actually this incredibly deep, twisted universe hiding beneath all the chaos, and when you start exploring it at bedtime, something magical happens. Tonight, we're diving into the strangest, most soothing rabbit hole on YouTube. We're talking about Family Guy lore that's specifically designed to help you sleep. And trust me, by the end of this journey, you'll understand why millions of people are choosing Stewie's time travel adventures over counting sheep. Let's start with why this works so well. Your brain needs something engaging enough to distract from racing thoughts, but not so stimulating that it keeps you awake. Family Guy lore hits this sweet spot perfectly. The familiar voices create a sense of comfort, like having old friends nearby. The storylines are complex enough to occupy your mind, but delivered in that laid-back, conversational tone that naturally slows your heart rate. The beauty of Family Guy as sleep content lies in its structure. Unlike other shows that build tension toward climactic moments, Family Guy operates on this weird, episodic flow where nothing is too serious or urgent. Even when Peter is destroying the town or Stewie is plotting world domination, there's this underlying absurdity that signals to your brain that everything is okay. It's chaos, but comfortable chaos. One of the most popular sleep topics is Stewie's time travel timeline. Now, if you've watched the show casually, you might think Stewie's time adventures are just random episodes. But when you dig deeper, there's this incredibly complex web of cause and effect that spans decades. Stewie has literally shaped the Griffin family history in ways most viewers never realize. Think about it. In one timeline, Stewie prevents his own birth, which creates this paradox where he exists but shouldn't. In another, he saves his father's life, completely altering the family dynamic. These aren't just throwaway episodes. They're building blocks of an intricate multiverse where every action ripples through time. And when someone narrates this in a gentle, sleepy voice while you're tucked in bed, it becomes this dreamy exploration of cause and effect that naturally leads your mind into sleep. The time travel lore gets even more interesting when you consider Stewie's relationship with Brian. Their adventures through different eras reveal hidden layers of both characters. Brian isn't just the family dog who talks. He's this tortured intellectual who's lived through multiple timelines, sometimes remembering previous versions of events, sometimes completely oblivious. The complexity of their friendship across different realities becomes this beautiful, melancholy meditation on friendship and loyalty. What makes this perfect for sleep is how these time travel stories often end with everything returning to normal, or at least a version of normal. There's no real stakes because the show's format demands that the status quo be maintained. Your subconscious picks up on this pattern and relaxes, knowing that no matter how wild the adventure gets, the Griffin family will be okay by morning. Another incredibly soothing topic is the hidden depth of Peter Griffin's character. On the surface, he's just this obnoxious, immature father figure. But when you start examining his backstory, there's surprising emotional complexity. Peter's relationship with his own father, Francis, reveals layers of abandonment issues and the desperate need for approval that drives much of his behavior. The Catholic guilt that shapes Peter's worldview, his struggles with identity, his genuine love for his family despite constantly endangering them, all of this creates this rich psychological portrait. When narrated as bedtime content, Peter's flaws become almost endearing. He's not a bad person, he's just deeply human in the most ridiculous possible way. The show has quietly built this mythology around Peter's various jobs and failures. From working at the brewery to his brief stint as a country music star, each career represents a different aspect of the American dream gone wrong. But instead of being depressing, it's oddly comforting. Peter always bounces back, always finds something new to be enthusiastic about. His resilience becomes this gentle reminder that failure isn't permanent, that there's always another chance to mess things up in new and interesting ways. Lois Griffin's background provides another rich vein of sleep-friendly lore. Her wealthy upbringing, her musical talents, her complicated relationship with her parents, all of this creates this fascinating contrast with her current life. She chose chaos over comfort, love over luxury. When explored in that drowsy, contemplative tone that characterizes good sleep content, Lois becomes this complex figure who represents the compromises we all make for love. The show has revealed that Lois has this incredibly patient, almost saint-like quality that allows her to tolerate Peter's behavior. But occasionally, we see cracks in this facade, moments where her true feelings break through. These glimpses of Lois's inner life become fascinating character studies when presented as gentle bedtime analysis. Meg Griffin represents something even more interesting in the show's mythology. She's the perpetual outsider, the family member who never quite fits in. But when you examine her character closely, she's often the most sensible person in the room. Her isolation isn't really about her being unlikable. It's about her being different, more grounded than the rest of her chaotic family. The psychological dynamics of how the Griffin family treats Meg reveal uncomfortable truths about family structures and social hierarchies. But when explored as sleep content, these observations become philosophical musings rather than harsh critiques. Meg's resilience in the face of constant rejection becomes almost inspiring, a quiet testament to the strength of people who don't fit conventional molds. Chris Griffin's journey through adolescence provides another layer of gentle complexity. His artistic talents, his kind heart, his struggles with self-image, all of this unfolds against the backdrop of typical teenage challenges, amplified by his family's dysfunction. Chris represents hope in the Griffin universe, the possibility that the next generation might break free from destructive patterns. The show has developed this subtle running theme about Chris's potential. He's genuinely talented, genuinely caring, but constantly undermined by his environment. When narrated as bedtime content, Chris's story becomes this quiet meditation on nurture versus nature, on how children can maintain their essential goodness despite chaotic circumstances. Brian Griffin deserves special attention because he's arguably the most complex character in the entire series. He's an intellectual trapped in a dog's body, an artist struggling with mediocrity, a liberal idealist living in a conservative household. His pretensions and failures make him simultaneously the most relatable and most frustrating character. Brian's writing career, his romantic relationships, his drinking problem, his philosophical debates with Stewie, all of this creates this rich tapestry of middle-aged disappointment wrapped in surreal comedy. When presented as sleep content, Brian's struggles become universal human experiences filtered through the lens of absurdity. The relationship between Brian and Stewie forms the emotional core of many episodes, and their dynamic has evolved significantly over the show's long run. Early episodes portrayed them as adversaries, but they've developed into this unusual friendship between two intellectuals who understand each other's isolation within the Griffin household. Their conversations, whether they're traveling through time or just sitting in the living room, often touch on profound themes of mortality, purpose, and connection. When these moments are compiled and narrated as bedtime content, they become these surprisingly deep philosophical discussions that naturally lead the mind toward contemplative rest. The supporting characters in Family Guy have developed their own rich backstories that provide endless material for sleep-friendly content. Glenn Quagmire, despite his obvious character flaws, has this complex history as a pilot and adventurer. His relationship with his father, his military service, his various romantic entanglements, all of this creates this surprisingly detailed character study. Cleveland Brown's departure and return to the show created interesting continuity questions that lore enthusiasts love to explore. The dynamics of the friend group, how relationships change over time, how people grow apart and come back together, these themes resonate on a deeper level when explored in that gentle, bedtime storytelling style. Joe Swanson's backstory as a police officer and his adjustment to life in a wheelchair provides material for surprisingly touching character exploration. His determination, his relationship with his family, his role as the moral center of Peter's friend group, all of this unfolds into rich character development that works beautifully as sleep content. The world building in Family Guy extends beyond the main characters to include the town of Quahog itself, the recurring locations, the background characters who appear across multiple episodes, the local politics and social dynamics. All of this creates a lived-in universe that feels surprisingly real, despite its cartoon absurdity. The show has developed this consistent internal logic about how Quahog operates, from the local government to the business community to the social hierarchies. When explored as lore content, these details create this comforting sense of a complete world where everything has its place, even if that place is completely ridiculous. Family Guy's relationship with pop culture provides another fascinating avenue for sleep-friendly exploration. The show's countless references and parodies create this massive web of connections to movies, TV shows, music, and historical events. Tracing these references becomes like a gentle intellectual exercise that occupies the mind without overstimulating it. The cultural commentary embedded in these references often reveals surprising insight about American society, entertainment, and human nature. When presented as bedtime analysis, these observations become thoughtful cultural criticism delivered in the most relaxed possible format. The show's approach to continuity creates interesting puzzles for lore enthusiasts. Some episodes clearly exist in the same universe, building on previous events and character development. Others seem to exist in isolation, resetting everything back to a baseline. Understanding which episodes connect and which stand alone becomes this gentle mental exercise, perfect for bedtime. This flexible approach to continuity actually enhances the show's value as sleep content. Unlike serialized dramas where missing details might leave you confused, Family Guy's episodic nature means you can drift in and out of consciousness without losing the thread of what's happening. The animation style and visual storytelling in Family Guy contribute to its effectiveness as sleep content. The character designs are simple and comforting. The color palette is warm and familiar, and the pacing of visual jokes follows predictable patterns. Your brain learns to anticipate the rhythm of the show, which naturally promotes relaxation. The voice acting deserves special mention because the performers have developed these characters over decades. The familiarity of these voices creates an immediate sense of comfort and security. Seth MacFarlane's multiple character voices, Alex Borstein as Lois, Mila Kunis as Meg, each voice becomes like a comfortable presence in your bedroom. The musical elements in Family Guy add another layer of sleep-friendly content. The show frequently features elaborate musical numbers that range from Broadway-style productions to simple character songs. These musical interludes often reveal character depths and emotions that regular dialogue might not capture. When compiled as sleep content, these musical moments become like gentle lullabies that showcase different aspects of the characters' personalities. Conway's witty performances, Stewie's show tunes, Peter's various musical adventures, all of this creates a diverse soundtrack for drifting off to sleep. The show's exploration of family dynamics provides universal themes that resonate regardless of the absurd context. The Griffin family, despite their dysfunction, genuinely cares about each other. Their conflicts and reconciliations follow familiar patterns that most viewers can relate to from their own family experiences. When examined as bedtime content, these family relationships become comforting reminders of the complexity and resilience of human connections. Even when Peter does something incredibly selfish or Stewie plots against his mother, the underlying love and loyalty always reassert themselves. The meta-humor in Family Guy creates another interesting layer for lore exploration. The show frequently acknowledges its own existence as a television program, breaking the fourth wall and commenting on its own production. These moments create this playful relationship between the show and its audience that enhances its value as comfort viewing. Understanding the real-world context behind certain episodes and jokes adds depth to the viewing experience without requiring intense concentration. The show's commentary on television, animation, and entertainment industry becomes gentle insider knowledge that enhances appreciation without demanding active analysis. The evolution of Family Guy over its many seasons provides rich material for comparative analysis. Early episodes had different character dynamics, different humor styles, and different production values. Tracing how the show has changed and developed becomes like following the growth of old friends. This long-term perspective on the series creates a sense of history and continuity that enhances its comfort value. You're not just watching random episodes. You're participating in this ongoing story that has unfolded over decades of real time. The fan community around Family Guy has developed its own theories and interpretations that add layers of meaning to seemingly simple episodes. These fan theories become part of the show's extended lore, creating additional content for exploration and discussion. When presented as bedtime content, these fan interpretations and theories become like bedtime stories shared among friends. They're speculative and playful rather than definitive, which makes them perfect for that drowsy state between wakefulness and sleep. The cultural impact of Family Guy extends beyond entertainment into social commentary and cultural criticism. The show has influenced animation, humor, and television production in measurable ways. Understanding this broader impact adds depth to individual episodes without requiring intense focus. This cultural context becomes another gentle layer of analysis that enhances the viewing experience. You're not just watching cartoons, you're experiencing a significant piece of contemporary American culture that has shaped entertainment and comedy. The merchandising and spin-off content around Family Guy creates additional universe expansion that lore enthusiasts love to explore. Video games, books, merchandise, and related media all contribute to the overall Griffin family mythology. These extensions of the core show become like supplementary reading that enhances understanding without being essential. They're bonus content that rewards dedicated fans while remaining accessible to casual viewers. So there you have it, the surprisingly deep and genuinely soothing world of Family Guy lore designed specifically for sleep. What started as a simple animated comedy has evolved into this rich, complex universe filled with character development, cultural commentary, and surprisingly profound themes about family, friendship, and human nature. The next time you're lying awake at 3 a.m, scrolling through endless content options, remember that sometimes the most unexpected choices make the best bedtime companions. Peter Griffin's chaotic adventures and Stewie's time travel paradoxes might just be exactly what your brain needs to finally relax and drift off into peaceful sleep. Sweet dreams. And remember, in the multiverse of Family Guy, everything always works out in the end, which is exactly the kind of reassurance we all need before closing our eyes for the night. What if I told you that behind the perfect housewife facade lies one of television's most twisted characters? The woman you think you know as the voice of reason in the Griffin household has actually murdered multiple people, cheated on her husband at least 12 times, and may have given birth to a child who isn't even his. This is the untold story of Lois Griffin, and trust me, it's darker than you ever imagined. Most people see Lois as the long-suffering wife who somehow tolerates Peter's antics while keeping their chaotic family together. But that's exactly what she wants you to think. The reality is that Lois Griffin has one of the most disturbing character arcs in animated television, filled with secrets that would make even the most hardened criminal blush. From her privileged upbringing to her descent into madness, every chapter of her life reveals new layers of dysfunction that will completely change how you see this seemingly innocent character. Let me take you back to where it all began. Lois wasn't always a Griffin. She was born Lois Pewterschmidt into one of the most powerful and dysfunctional families on the East Coast. Picture this: a sprawling mansion in Newport, Rhode Island, where money flowed like water, but emotional warmth was as rare as honest politicians. Her father, Carter Pewterschmidt, built an empire on ruthless business practices, while her mother, Babs, played the role of the perfect trophy wife, both too busy with their own ambitions to give their children the love they desperately needed. But here's where the story takes its first dark turn. Lois had a brother named Patrick, and this family secret will haunt you. As a young child, Patrick witnessed something so traumatic involving his mother that it broke his mind completely. Carter's solution wasn't therapy or family healing. He had his own son shipped off to a mental institution and erased from family history like he never existed. This wasn't just neglect. This was calculated, emotional brutality that would set the tone for how this family handled problems, make them disappear. Growing up in this environment, Lois and her sister Carol developed completely different survival mechanisms. Carol became desperate for male attention, rushing into relationship after relationship, collecting divorces like trophies. By the time we meet her, she's been married and divorced 8 times. Each failed relationship a symptom of the emotional void their parents created. But Lois chose a different path: rebellion disguised as conformity. As a teenager, Lois discovered a passion for modeling. For once, she had found something that made her feel alive, something that was hers. But when a legitimate modeling contract was offered, Carter crushed her dreams without hesitation. His exact words were chilling. His daughter would not lower herself to such work. This wasn't parental protection. This was control, masked as concern for social status. And this moment planted the first seeds of the resentment that would later explode into her adult dysfunction. College became Lois's escape hatch, but instead of finding freedom, she found chaos. At Kent State University, she threw herself into everything her controlling father had forbidden. She partied with reckless abandon, broke every rule she could find, and made choices that would haunt her for decades. The most shocking of these was starring in an adult film, not for money or fame, but as the ultimate act of rebellion against her family's pristine image. Think about the psychology here. This wasn't some wild phase or momentary lapse in judgment. This was a young woman so damaged by emotional neglect and control that she was willing to do anything to feel like she had agency over her own life. The fact that she shared this secret so casually with a reporter she barely knew tells us everything about her desperate need for authenticity in a life built on lies and appearances. But the real bombshell comes when we examine how she met Peter Griffin. Here's where the story becomes almost too bizarre to believe. Peter wasn't some college boyfriend or family friend. He was literally hired as a pool boy to clean her family's estate. Picture the scene. The refined daughter of a billionaire family falls for a man whose greatest talent is making fart jokes. On the surface, it looks like a classic opposites attract romance. But dig deeper, and you'll see the psychological warfare at play. Lois choosing Peter wasn't love at first sight. It was the nuclear option in her war against her father's expectations. Carter had controlled every aspect of her life, from her career choices to her social circle. So she chose the one person guaranteed to horrify him, a working-class man with zero social graces and fewer brain cells. This wasn't romance. This was revenge, with wedding vows. When Carter discovered their relationship, his reaction was swift and brutal. He had Peter knocked, unconscious and dumped in the middle of the ocean like some kind of mob hit. But Peter survived, and here's where things get interesting. Carter then offered Peter $1 million to walk away forever. Peter's response reveals something crucial about their dynamic. He turned down the money, claiming Lois was worth more to him than cash. But his exact words were telling. He said she was worthless to him, which is why he loved her. This wasn't the romantic declaration it appeared to be. This was two damaged people finding each other through mutual dysfunction. Peter saw in Lois someone who wouldn't judge his failures because she was running from her own. Lois saw in Peter the ultimate weapon against her family's suffocating expectations. Their love story wasn't built on compatibility or shared values. It was built on shared rebellion against the lives they were supposed to live. The cracks in this foundation became obvious almost immediately. When they tried to start fresh, after college, they broke up. Lois got engaged to Tom Tucker, a much more logical choice that her family approved of. But Peter couldn't let go, not because of love, but because losing Lois meant losing his identity as the rebel who stole the rich girl. So he crashed her wedding in a desperate last-ditch effort to reclaim what he saw as his greatest achievement. What happened next reveals the true toxicity of their relationship. Lois was already pregnant with Meg when they eloped, which means their entire marriage was built on necessity rather than choice. She literally couldn't back out even if she wanted to. This detail reframes their entire relationship. Every fight, every moment of dysfunction, every terrible decision can be traced back to this moment when two people trapped themselves in a marriage neither really wanted. Parenthood didn't fix their problems. It amplified them exponentially. Their first instinct as new parents was to abandon Meg at a fire station. When that failed, they took her home to Spooner Street, but the damage was already done. This child represented everything wrong with their relationship. Unplanned, unwanted, and a constant reminder of the life neither had chosen. As more children arrived, Lois's parenting style became increasingly unhinged. With Meg, she started as a protective mother, but gradually became cruel and dismissive. The most heartbreaking example is when Meg pours her heart out, telling Lois she loves her, and Lois can't bring herself to say it back. This isn't just poor parenting. This is emotional abandonment that mirrors her own childhood trauma. But Meg isn't the only victim of Lois's maternal dysfunction. She's physically abused Stewie, getting so desperate for pills that she dunked his head in a toilet to retrieve one that fell in. She ran over him with her car and immediately tried to cover it up, rather than face the consequences. These aren't accidents or momentary lapses. They're patterns of behavior that reveals someone completely detached from normal parental instincts. Even with Chris, supposedly her favorite, she's done things that cross every line of appropriate motherly behavior. When rumors spread that he was involved with an attractive teacher, instead of shutting down the inappropriate speculation, she confirmed it herself. This isn't protective parenting. This is a woman so desperate for attention that she'll exploit her own children to get it. The drug addiction storyline reveals just how far Lois has fallen from her privileged upbringing. This isn't recreational use or social experimentation. This is full-blown addiction that turns her into a criminal. She starts dealing drugs, becomes a kleptomaniac, and eventually graduates to violent crime. The woman who grew up in mansions is now poisoning baristas and kidnapping innocent people to maintain her position as the best customer at a coffee shop. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of Lois's character is her complete moral flexibility. She runs for mayor claiming to fight corruption, then immediately becomes as corrupt as the person she replaced. She allows oil companies to dump waste in the city's water supply for money. This isn't political compromise. This is selling out an entire community for personal gain. Her relationship with violence is equally troubling. She's admitted to killing multiple people, including a waitress on their honeymoon as part of some sick game with Peter. She traumatized Chris by revealing she'd killed someone with her car, then casually mentioned that all mothers have killed someone, as if murder was just another household chore. The pattern becomes clear when you look at her complete story. Every major decision in Lois's life has been driven by one of two motives: rebelling against her family's expectations, or covering up the consequences of previous rebellions. She chose Peter to spite her father. She had children because she was trapped. She became addicted to drugs to cope with her choices. She turned to crime to support her addictions. Each step led inevitably to the next in a downward spiral that shows no signs of stopping. Her infidelity adds another layer to this psychological profile. Lois hasn't just cheated on Peter occasionally. She's been systematically unfaithful throughout their entire marriage. She's had affairs with Bill Clinton, rock stars from the 80s, and even Peter's own half-brother. The most shocking revelation is her admission that Chris might not even be Peter's biological son, the result of an affair with actor Philip Seymour Hoffman. This isn't a woman struggling with temptation. This is someone who views marriage vows as suggestions rather than commitments. Her pattern of cheating reveals someone incapable of genuine intimacy, constantly seeking validation from new partners because she's never resolved the emotional damage from her childhood. The psychological implications become even more disturbing when you consider her relationships with Brian and Quagmire. Both men have been obsessed with her for years, and in alternate timelines, she's married both of them. This suggests that her appeal isn't based on genuine connection, but on some kind of emotional unavailability that draws damaged men to her like moths to a flame. Her bisexual tendencies, while potentially representing healthy sexual exploration, fit the same pattern. She kisses women impulsively, fantasizes about running away with female cashiers, and engages in passionate encounters with friends' wives. But these aren't expressions of genuine sexual identity. They're more rebellion, more ways to shock and transgress against social expectations. As Lois ages, the consequences of her choices begin catching up with her. By her 50th birthday, doctors are warning she might not survive much longer due to the physical toll of her lifestyle and the violence she's experienced. Stewie planted a time bomb in her uterus as an infant, and Chris nearly killed her during childbirth. These details aren't just dark humor. They're metaphors for how her own children have become weapons turned against her, the inevitable result of her toxic parenting. The future episodes show Lois and Peter still together in their retirement home. But this isn't a happy ending. It's two people too damaged and codependent to separate, even when they probably should. Their adult children push them into assisted living, suggesting that even as grown-ups, the Griffin kids can't wait to get their parents out of their lives. But here's what makes Lois truly fascinating as a character. She's not entirely unsympathetic. Every terrible thing she's done can be traced back to the emotional neglect and control she experienced as a child. Her father crushed her dreams and treated her like a possession. Her mother was absent and cold. Her brother was literally erased from family history when he became inconvenient. Is it any wonder she grew up incapable of healthy relationships or appropriate boundaries? The tragedy of Lois Griffin isn't that she became a terrible person. It's that she never had a real chance to become anything else. Every relationship in her life has been transactional or manipulative. She learned early that love comes with conditions and that people will abandon you if you become inconvenient. So she became someone who abandons others first, who cheats before being cheated on, who hurts before being hurt. Her criminal behavior isn't random chaos. It's the logical endpoint of a life spent learning that rules don't apply to people with money and power. Her father built an empire through ruthless business practices and made problems disappear through violence and money. Is it surprising that his daughter grew up thinking murder and corruption were just more extreme versions of normal problem solving? The drug addiction storyline reveals someone desperately trying to numb the pain of a life she never wanted. The cheating shows someone searching for connection she's never experienced. The violent outbursts demonstrate someone who learned early that force and manipulation get better results than honesty and vulnerability. Even her relationship with Peter, dysfunctional as it is, represents her attempt to break free from the toxic patterns of her childhood. She chose someone completely different from her father, someone who couldn't control or manipulate her through money or social pressure. The problem is that she chose someone equally damaged, someone whose emotional instability matched her own. The most disturbing aspect of Lois's story is how it reflects real-world patterns of generational trauma. Children who grow up in emotionally abusive environments often struggle to form healthy relationships as adults. They may seek out partners who replicate familiar patterns of dysfunction because chaos feels like home. They may become abusive parents themselves, not out of malice, but because they never learned healthy parenting models. Lois's story is a masterclass in how privilege can't protect children from emotional damage. All the money in the world couldn't give her what she really needed. Parents who loved her unconditionally and supported her dreams. Instead, she got parents who treated her like a business asset and a social accessory, valued only for how she reflected on their reputation. The brilliance of her character lies in how the show presents her as both victim and villain simultaneously. Yes, she's done terrible things that hurt innocent people. But understanding why she did them doesn't excuse the behavior. It explains how someone becomes capable of such actions. She's a cautionary tale about what happens when children don't receive the emotional foundation they need to become healthy adults. Her relationship with her own children reflects this cycle of dysfunction. She can't give them what she never received herself. Her inability to say "I love you" to Meg isn't just cruelty. It's the echo of parents who never said those words to her. Her physical abuse of Stewie mirrors the emotional violence she experienced growing up. But perhaps the most chilling aspect of Lois's character is how normal she appears on the surface. She's articulate, intelligent, and socially skilled when she needs to be. She can play the role of the concerned mother, the devoted wife, the responsible citizen. This ability to present a functional facade while being completely broken inside makes her more dangerous than someone whose dysfunction is obvious. The show's genius lies in slowly revealing the depths of her damage over time. Early episodes presented her as the reasonable one, the moral center of the family. But as the series progressed, each new revelation stripped away another layer of that facade until we saw the broken person underneath. This isn't character assassination. It's archaeological excavation, uncovering the psychological damage that was always there but carefully hidden. Looking at Lois Griffin's complete story, we see a masterpiece of character development that illustrates how childhood trauma can echo through generations. She's not just a cartoon character making bad choices for laughs. She's a complex psychological portrait of someone whose entire life has been shaped by early emotional wounds that never healed. Her story serves as a dark mirror to the American dream, showing how wealth and privilege can create their own forms of destruction. The Pewterschmidt family had everything money could buy, but nothing that actually mattered. And their daughter grew up to become living proof that you can't buy emotional health or authentic human connection. The most disturbing realization about Lois Griffin is that she's not an anomaly. She's a recognizable type. We all know people who seem to have everything together on the surface, but whose personal lives are complete disasters. We see them in positions of power, making decisions that affect others while being completely incapable of managing their own emotional lives. Lois Griffin's entire story is a cautionary tale about the price of emotional neglect and the generational transmission of trauma. She started as a victim of her parents' dysfunction and became the architect of her children's future therapy bills. Her legacy isn't the crimes she's committed or the people she's hurt. It's the cycle of damage that will likely continue through her own children unless they find ways to break free from the patterns she's established. In the end, Lois Griffin represents one of television's most complex and disturbing character studies. She's simultaneously the victim of generational trauma and the perpetrator of new trauma, a woman whose entire life has been shaped by her unsuccessful attempts to escape the emotional prison her parents built around her childhood. Understanding her story doesn't excuse her actions, but it does explain how someone becomes capable of such systematic dysfunction while maintaining the appearance of normalcy. The brilliance of her character lies not in the shocking things she does, but in how those actions reflect deeper patterns of psychological damage that make perfect sense once you understand where she came from. She's not crazy. She's the logical product of her environment, which makes her story both more tragic and more terrifying than any random acts of villainy could ever be.